Obla-dee, obla-da. Ghiaccio and his Stand the White album are just going to have to let it be, because they're about to have a long, long, long Hard Day's Night. Are any of these Beatles puns doing it for you? Greetings, my friends. Before you watch this review, I just want to give a shameless plug-in to a recent review that I worked on. It's my review of Dragon Ball Super Broly, the latest Dragon Ball movie. I had a lot of cool things to say about it. I worked my ass off on the video, and I really want you guys to see it. There will be a link for that in the description box below, so make sure to check it out, share it with your friends. Alright, it's JoJo time. Greetings, my friends! It's time to take a look at another episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind, an episode which wraps up the battle with Ghiaccio and his icy-centric stand, the White Album. And this episode was satisfying as all hell. I'm gonna go ahead and put up that preemptive spoiler warning, because there's always gonna be that one person in the comments who says, gee, you should have put up a spoiler warning, douchebag. It's a fucking review and it's my opinion on the show. Get over it. So, let's go ahead and jump right in. This episode was really satisfying, especially the ending, which was a little drawn out, I have to admit, but watching Giorno actually fight back against Ghiaccio was incredibly satisfying because he finally brought out his inner Dio. He finally let loose a lot of mudas, which is to say he was saying useless over and over again, but it just reminded me of every single time that Dio did it, especially with his battle against Jotaro. The only difference being that Giorno is a man of honor. He's not a complete and utter douchebag like his father, and to see him take down Ghiaccio was incredibly satisfying. It was inevitable that Ghiaccio was going to be defeated by Giorno and Mista, but the way that it went down was done in that distinctive, creative JoJo way. Only a couple of things actually happened in this episode, but the way that they are actually portrayed was just the perfect amount of ridiculousness. So it picks up from the end of the last episode where Giorno decided the best course of action is just to drive right into the damn river. Of course, this ends up biting them in the ass is because rivers have water in them and they can be frozen, and Ghiaccio takes complete control over this. And the way that they display how destructive his power is, I have to say, is incredibly ghastly, especially when Mista actually ends up having a lot of chunks of his flesh ripped off from his hand when they get completely frozen and he tries to pull it away. It's incredibly horrifying to see it happen, but again, they always manage to come up with a plan that's so ridiculous it can only work in the series. And you know what? It makes sense. This is coming from a show where a dude exploded out of a volcano and defeated a vampire by throwing him into space, so I'm willing to accept this kind of weird shit, but I have to say it got pretty damned ridiculous when Mista came up with the plan of getting Giorno to transform parts of the car into grass, freezing said grass, and transforming it into a fucking snowboard. That all happens in this episode as he tries to escape from the river and get onto the banks, but of course Ghiaccio always manages to stop him and starts to freeze everything. But this is when they start to analyze a little bit of his weaknesses. How can they actually attack him? Not only does his stand allow him to amplify his ice powers, but it also protects him from bullets. There has to be some sort of like weakness in his armor, and they discover it when Ghiaccio actually goes underwater and they can see the air bubbles actually coming out from behind his neck. There is a hole there which actually allows him to breathe. That's when Mista decides the only way they're going to be able to take this guy down is if they either shoot him in the neck or they find some way to actually damage him from behind. Of course, it's not going to be that simple at all, and it leads to a scene where the characters effectively almost have to completely sacrifice themselves to take this guy down. Mista in particular, who starts to fire at him wildly with the Sex Pistols, but again, Ghiaccio has another trick up his sleeve where he's able to rapidly freeze all the air around him to where there's like these giant floating icicles, which can pretty much deflect just about anything, including Mista's bullets. And lo and behold, these bullets end up flying right back into Mista, and he ends up getting like shot repeatedly, knowing that eventually he might be able to hit him. But of course, he comes up with a plan that could only work in JoJo. One of his bullets ends up hitting this lamppost, and a large chunk of it starts to jut out almost like a spike, and he actually ends up pushing Ghiaccio into it, where that spike actually ends up getting jammed into the back of his neck. And right as it's about to go completely through his neck, he uses the blood that's been squirted all over his body and from his neck to freeze it and stop him from getting impaled. And this all happens because Mista has the crazy plan of allowing his blood from his wounds to get splashed on his face and get frozen. I don't know how these guys are able to think of all of this stuff in just like a split second, but damn, that is just fucking awesome. But it's Giorno who actually ends up being the hero of this episode in an incredibly badass scene where Ghiaccio is stopping himself from being impaled by this spike, and suddenly the sun starts to rise, and then we see Giorno basking in all of it, and he uses the power of Golden Experience to not use its typical powers, but to kick the shit out of Ghiaccio to the point where he ends up getting completely impaled through the neck on this massive metal spike. It is fucking awesome, and I especially loved how he was doing the whole muda 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 muda. The episode ends with Giorno and Mista being successful in their battle. Mista is going to be saved thanks to Giorno, who can turn the bullets inside of his body into living objects, but the pain is still going to remain, so he's gonna have to get over that. But considering that he basically, like, stapled a wound earlier in the episode, I have a feeling he can probably fight his way through the pain. They end up getting the disc, and we're this much closer to getting Trish to her father. So what's the rundown on this episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind? Another episode which is completely tent-poled by its amazing and creative action. Almost nothing happened in the episode, just Giorno and Mista running to the bank and fighting Ghiaccio, but the way that it was actually portrayed in this episode is honestly what made it for me the entire time. Ghiaccio was one hell of a rough customer, and it almost seemed like his powers were damn near indestructible with the way he was able to fight back against both Giorno and Mista. But again, a crazy convoluted plan unfolds, and it ends up being the best thing about the episode. And of course, very satisfying to finally see this guy actually get beaten. As I said earlier, I love the callback to Dio, especially with seeing Giorno actually attack with the relentless muda muda muda. We've seen him say it a couple of times in the series, but to see it fully come to fruition in this episode was just so damned awesome. He can do all of that and his hair still looks fabulous. That's impressive. I will say I am going to miss Ghiaccio, but mostly just because his voice actor is the same as Katsuki Bakugo, and just listening to him scream and get pissed off just always puts a big smile on my face. But again, I like how they took this guy who had a seemingly standard kind of power, just ice powers. You see this all the time in movies and comic books and even other anime series, but they managed to do a few things different with it in this episode, not to mention his stand powers is basically wearing just like a really fancy ski suit. That, and of course, Ghiaccio seems to have a weird obsession with the Beatles, the fact that his stand is known as the White Album, and the fact that when he does these big attacks, he says it gently weeps. If you're a fan of the Beatles, you're probably going to get a lot of enjoyment out of that, and again, it carries on the tradition of a lot of the characters and stands in the JoJo series being named after bands, albums, or music. Ultimately, I think that this was probably my favorite assassin battle thus far, and we really only have one left, and that's against Risotto, and they've been building it up quite a bit. I can't wait to see what that guy is going to be capable of. He always seemed like the most menacing, mostly because he has completely weird, freaky, glowing red eyes, but I'm really anticipating to see how they're going to fight back against this guy, and more importantly, who's actually going to fight against him, as everybody pretty much has had a chance to fight against all of these assassins. I wonder if now they're all just going to team up against this guy, or if they're exclusively going to give this battle to Giorno. If they're following the tradition of the series, it looks like Mista's probably going to get involved, as he's essentially the Polnareff of this season, getting the most screen time and the most battles. Still, I'm very anxious to see how it's all going to go down. Really, I loved this episode though, which is why I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. You guys need to check it out. I'd love to get your thoughts about the episode if you did watch it. Tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. If you had any favorite moments, what did you like about Ghiaccio's power? Were you satisfied by the ending of the episode? And what do you hope to see with the battle with Risotto and the end of the assassin arc of Golden Wind? Let's get a discussion going about this one in the comments section. And like I said at the beginning of the video, make sure to check out my review on Dragon Ball Super Broly. There will be a link for that video in the description box. Make sure to share it with all your friends, like it, and all that other YouTube jazz. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down, baby.